Something Marvel's Midnight Suns does very well is the feel of the heroes. The characters have a true to form design and play like you would expect them to, with abilities that, for the most part, give defined combat roles. The exception to this is obviously Hunter, a hero that was specifically created for this game and has more cards and versatility than any other hero. With the dark and light sides that lend themselves to different style playthroughs, my personal preference is a mix of both for good synergies and team support. Hunter is also one of the few heroes that can heal any team member, sometimes even doing damage with the same card. Kind of expected as they are the main character, it's an easy S tier, both light and dark. As for female Hunter, I've never done a playthrough with her. I don't know why this tier list has her as a separate option, but I am 99% sure it's the same, except you probably earn less credits per mission, am I right? Moving on to Nico, this is a character that I really didn't use a lot of early game because I didn't care for her too much, but I gotta say her healing skills definitely came in clutch in the late game. The card that can fully restore and stay in your deck if it does over 50% healing is invaluable sometimes. She also has an awesome looking legendary ability and the potential to do big chain damage. However, since most of her abilities are random and untargetable, it really brings her down because she can either help you a lot or do absolutely nothing for you. She gets a C. Blade is an unspectacular, if not reliable character, and he's pretty strong all around. His ability to bleed enemies is very powerful, as bleed does a lot of damage in this game. Also, having a 25% chance bleed passive is just great for extra shot at a little bit more damage here and there. To top it all off, he's a vampire, so he's got lifesteal to help him stay alive, and he's also got a few multi-hit crowd control abilities. Blade truly is a jack of all trades who's good at pretty much everything, just not great at anything, bringing him to a solid B tier. Cap is a phenomenal tank and support with the passive that props up that playstyle all day where you start with the block, and the ability to do big single damage balanced with his blocking, which I think is pretty cool because it plays into the whole shield thing. His ability set really leans into the role of this hero, but also, I know it's his character, but the goodest of good guys, leadership monologues and speeches went a little too long, a little too often. I know a lot of the characters do this, but for some reason I noticed it more with him. I'm gonna put him in the B tier. This is a tough one, I'm not gonna lie. Deadpool overall was a little bit of a disappointment to me. As a character and for entertainment value, I enjoyed his side story. The one-liners and humor had their moments, but nothing great, and at first I really didn't care for the voice actor. Too used to Ryan Reynolds, I guess. As far as the abilities go, Deadpool can deal some big single target damage, but his standard and area of effect abilities just leave a lot to be desired. The Enfuego system is mostly more gimmick than useful in my opinion, and all of this just adds up to a painfully average hero that doesn't give too many reasons to pick him over the other options most of the time. If I'm missing something here, please let me know, but to me, he's a D. I feel like there's a joke in there somewhere. The other captain on the team, Marvel, is also a tank that can flip and do decent single target damage as well. Most of her abilities, in my opinion, feel kind of vanilla though, including her legendary, which almost requires going binary to feel legendary. The cheap heroism cost does make up for some of that, but I almost prefer Photon Beam for a line of multi-target damage and the added benefit of taunting. Her passives and card that give stacks of counter make the taunting even more valuable for clearing out weaker enemies or just a little extra damage. Going binary isn't very difficult to achieve either, so for that, she gets a B. Magik is one of the most fun heroes to use. She can really control the battlefield and shift enemy positioning, plus her reinforcement ability is the only way to get an extra team member on a mission, although it's only a few turns and sometimes it doesn't really work out as well as you would think. However, she's not a very big damage dealer, and while the portals and knockbacks are especially fantastic with the right environmental objects around, that's a very limited specific use case. As a solid support that mostly shines with the right team around her, she just comes out to a C for me. Morbius, similar to Blade, is a very versatile hero. While Blade feels a bit more sturdy and built for high single target damage, Morbius plays into a broader range of abilities, plus an easy to trigger bloodlust buff that gives him some added block and bleed damage. He's also one of the only 3 heroes with a conceal ability card, and personally, I love Charm. It can make certain mission types much easier and faster to deal with. Pair him up with Blade and the two complement each other extremely well, obviously, but I think Morbius overall edges him out just a little bit. He gets an A. Iron Man is the perfect complement to almost any hero team. He has everything, from massive AoE abilities that can clear crowds quickly to support like giving block to an ally or inflicting negative status effects on enemies. The redraw mechanic to make his cards more powerful or add effects is a nice touch and gives a little more weight to a combat mechanic that's not necessarily used very often. Bonus points for the entertaining Tony Stark Doctor Strange back and forth. Iron Man got a lot of love in Midnight Suns. He's an S tier. Strictly as a character, I really feel like Venom delivered in Midnight Suns. The back and forth with Eddie and some of the one-liners are very entertaining, and all of it just feels true to form and executed well. But Venom is also a beast in combat. He's very independent as he can lifesteal, do AoE damage, and draw a lot of his own cards. If set up correctly, his Assimilation legendary ability can clear out entire mobs, and he also has big single target damage potential. The Ravenous system does kinda cap him, but without it he would easily be one of the most overpowered late game heroes. Honestly, I expected a Spider-Man with a few different twists, but Venom really is unique and able to fit into pretty much any team composition. He gets an A. Speaking of Spider-Man, even though we've gotten way too many reboots of the movies, the character of Peter Parker, I guess, is just likable. That spreads to Midnight Suns, where Spidey is one of my favorite heroes, although in the grand scheme of things, not necessarily the strongest or most useful. He has Bind, which makes for a good complement to Hunter's Merciless ability, and plays a lot on the environmental attack aspect, which is solid, but not really as helpful as you progress deeper into the game. It's a lot more of like a chip shot than big damage. Up here is probably one of my favorite area of effect attacks, and Chain Strike is great for taking out the minions, although not very powerful outside of that. I guess what I'm getting at is Spider-Man is a feel-good character, but an overall kind of average combatant. Average damage, decent support, and some slick-looking suits get him a B. Doctor Strange is an unmatched support hero with very valuable abilities to help manipulate the action economy, starting with his passive giving a 50-50 chance to generate 2 heroism each turn, an ability granting an extra card play, or just giving resists, which, let's be honest, is one of the most powerful buffs in the game to the entire team. Strange pretty much has all of your bases covered. To add to it, he even has a couple of high damage attacks of his own that he can use. Not quite S tier, as he's rightfully not very tanky and leans a lot more into helping than damage dealing, but a very solid A tier character. Wolverine, as expected, is an offensive powerhouse. A lot of chain abilities make crowd control a breeze, his healing factor passive makes him easy to keep alive, and even if he does get knocked out, he has a free revive with rapid regeneration. All of that is already incredibly good, but to top it off, he can taunt, counter, lifesteal, heal himself, and do extra damage to help pierce block. Logan is tough to kill and can take on even the biggest enemies. It's an easy S tier. That brings us to another should-be offensive powerhouse, the Hulk. And I'll just be completely honest here, the Hulk doesn't really feel all that hulky. It's a weird cross between who he is as this borderline, unkillable, overpowered enemy in the campaign and how he just doesn't have that same energy when he's on your team. I do like his ability to straight up stun enemies, which is one of my favorite high damage stacks. Stun with Hulk and follow up with Merciless from Hunter, and he is capable of big single target damage, but overall as a character and ability wise, Hulk just kind of feels like he's not as fleshed out as he should be. I believe he was originally not meant to be playable and got added in near the end of development, so that probably has something to do with it. Unfortunately, he's a C tier. One of the most painful experiences for me during Midnight Suns was the first handful of missions I ran trying to fit Wanda into a team. I absolutely hated using her starting deck and really felt like they missed the mark of how powerful Scarlet Witch was. She's very hit or miss with her abilities. Quick Toss is one of the more powerful quick abilities, for example, and Hexmark is ridiculous for the action economy if synergized correctly. However, her legendary takes her out of action, and a lot of her abilities really rely on positioning her and or the rest of your team very well. A lot of forward thinking is required when using her, and in my opinion, a payoff a lot of times is just not all that impressive. To me, she just ended up feeling very niche and sporadic. I gotta give her a C. One of the best things about Storm is that she really feels like an original character. Her setups and abilities feel different and unlike any of the other heroes, and while I know some people don't like the whole next turn thing, it never really bothered me too much, especially once you get Goddess's Blessing to bypass that whole mechanic. One of the more underrated things about Storm also is that her passive gives a chance to stun off of any heroic or attack ability on top of her regular stun abilities, making her one of the few heroes that can even do that. She also has awesome support like giving resist to the whole team and a lot of crowd control to go with it. A solid health pool tops it off to make Storm one of the best all-around heroes, A tier. Ghost Rider is a tough one to rank for me. Early on, I really struggled finding a good reason to use him and didn't think too highly of his deck as a whole. His ultimate ability, Hellride, was great crowd damage, but discards the rest of your hand, which makes it a lot tougher to use in certain situations. His legendary ability, however, is one of the coolest looking and best damage dealing of its kind when set up right, and that's kind of Robbie's whole thing. He's not a straightforward style hero, and really takes some figuring out on how to maximize his damage and usefulness. Once you do, however, he can really take and give a lot out, along with having one of the highest damage quick abilities in the game, Lash. Middle late game Ghost Rider is a solid addition to any team that's not crazy OP. Because of the poor starting deck though, I'm gonna put him in the B tier. I'd love to hear in the comments if you guys agree or disagree with my rankings, and if you're still trying to decide if you should even play Midnight Suns, check out the video on screen now.